The Communist Party really believes that it represents the best interests of the people. Problem is, the people are so stupid they don't know what their interests are.
Right.
But the communists do. And liberals, I think, are beginning to think exactly the same way.
Yes.
That people don't know what's good for them, but Hillary and Barack and
John Edwards,
Nancy Pelosi, and the rest of them, they really know what's good for the American people. They have to save the American people from themselves.
Yeah. Well, that's always been kind of the core principle of liberalism, is saving the people from themselves, saving the individual from himself.
That's right.
You know that we are we are not only their fiscal safety net, but we're going to be their mental safety net as well.
Well, one of the things I found interesting, though, and I don't think we've mentioned it yet, Mark, is that vote in the House yesterday.
What was that?
Not yesterday. Last week, the Pence Amendment.
Right.
Which essentially prohibits the FCC from using federal funds to enforce the Fairness Doctrine on talk radio. By the way, the Fairness Doctrine was thrown out by the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't Congress that got rid of the Fairness Doctrine, it was the Supreme Court, so I'm not sure how they could bring it back. Also, the Fairness Doctrine was never applied to talk radio. When the Fairness Doctrine existed, it was applied to newspapers, it was applied to television stations to the extent that if a television station, for instance, editorialized, it had to allow people in the community to present opposing views.
Right.
But it was never applied to talk radio. People in the FCC never went to a talk station and said, well, you have Rush Limbaugh, and you have Sean Hannity, and you have Laura Ingraham, and all of these conservative hosts. Now, where are your liberals?
Right, and
it was never applied that way.
No, it was applied to radio, but let's remember that in 1949 there really was no talk radio, or 1947 when that Fairness Doctrine came in, and it wasn't until the early 50s. I think it was Barry Farber started doing talk radio by holding the receiver of a telephone up to the microphone, so that you could, with the earpiece against the microphone so that the listeners could hear the caller. That was
I know Barry very well,
yeah.
By the way.
And that was the very nascent beginnings of what we call talk radio today. But yeah, the medium didn't existed, but I remember, Don, when I got into this business 30 years ago, the way the Fairness Doctrine affected us was if we did a public affairs program on anything, we had to go out and find someone, people on both sides, and sit down and do this very boring, Sunday morning 6 a.m. type program that no one wanted to listen to because it was just like really dry, and it was like, reading something out of a science manual, just boring stuff. And no one listened to that kind of thing.
Yeah, I worked for a news station, Mark, back in the early 1980s.
Okay.
Before I went to work for the Boston Herald, and we did something very similar. We did a religion roundtable.
Okay.
Where we brought in people with different points of view, clergy. I was the moderator of a show, and they had a chance to share their views about abortion, whatever the controversial political issues were. We always try to achieve balance. And I'm convinced that other than family members of the people who were on the shows that we did, no one listened to it.
No, because everything was presented in a sense of, well, everything is good, everyone's opinion is good, and let's all just join hands and sing Kumbaya, and then we'll take off after that. No one wanted to profess an opinion because they were deathly afraid of professing their opinion on any issue of the day.
Well, when the Fairness Doctrine was written, Mark, as I think most of your listeners know, there was no Internet, there was no cable television.
Right.
Basically, there were 3 networks in the country. That was it.
And
there wasn't the proliferation of radio stations that exist today. So a lot of media outlets really had a monopoly.
Yeah, and there was only AM radio too.
That's right. That's right. And of course, today there's probably more diversity, especially in broadcast media, particularly on the Internet and talk radio, than anyone could have imagined when the Fairness Doctrine was written. But to give you I don't want to take a lot of time on this, Mark, but to give you one example of the hypocrisy of people in Congress who want to resurrect the fairness doctrine and apply it to talk radio. Here you had Dianne Feinstein, one of your favorite politicians, I'm sure.
Yeah.
She was on a morning talk show a few weeks ago, and she was saying, well, there should be balance. All points of view should be heard. Which is their excuse for crushing. This is their rationale for crushing dissent. But recently, the Ninth Circuit Appeals Court, the most left-leaning appeals court in the country, upheld a decision by the city of Oakland. I think this happened in 2002. You had a group of Christian women,
yes,
who happened to be African American, by the way, who formed a group called, if I'm not mistaken, it was called the Good News Women's Association or something like that. They wanted access to Oakland's municipal email system because the city had allowed homosexual employees to put out notices of gay pride parades, and they wanted the opportunity to use the system to put out notices of what they were doing, talking about family values, marriage, the importance of a natural family, and of course, the city of Oakland refused to give them the same access that it gave to the homosexuals. And of course, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld this, not surprisingly. And your listeners may wonder, well, where was Senator Feinstein?
Uh-oh.
I mean, doesn't Dianne Feinstein believe in letting every voice be heard? Doesn't she believe in balance? Doesn't she believe in fairness? Well, only in regard to talk radio. That's the only place where the left believes in let every voice be heard, fairness, balance, only in regard to talk radio, nowhere else.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing, and the difference between the two is that talk radio, commercial radio, is not supported by the taxpayers. The city of Oakland, of course, is funded by the taxpayers, so everyone who pays taxes in the city of Oakland should have equal access to the city's facilities. And secondly, if you want to talk about the structural imbalance of broadcasting, Don, when was the last time you ran across a radio station between 88 and 91 on the FM dial that had conservative talk programming on it? The non-commercial band where the Pacifica radio stations are and the NPR stations?
I can't think of any instance.
Where's the report about the structural imbalance of non-commercial public radio that we all pay our taxes for?
Well, sure. And then of course there's National Public Radio, there's the Public Broadcasting System, which are also taxpayer funded. Mm-hmm. And there's just one point of view overwhelmingly expressed on public radio and public television. I'll give you another example of this.
Sure, go ahead.
State colleges and universities. Again, if you look at the faculties, especially the liberal arts faculties of most state colleges and universities, taxpayer funded, you'll find that 90%, 95% of the faculties are way to the left. I mean, to the left of Dianne Feinstein, if you can imagine such a thing, to the left of Nancy Pelosi. And yet no one in Congress is saying, well, now, wait a minute, taxpayers are forced to fund state colleges and universities. Shouldn't there be some balance in the faculty?
Yeah.
Shouldn't conservatives have as much of an opportunity to teach as people on the left? But again, these people, and by these people I mean people like Boxer, Feinstein, Pelosi, Clinton, John Kerry, they only believe in diversity when it applies to talk radio, nowhere else.
Yeah, no, it's very true, and it is because it threatens their hegemony over the media. And if you want to talk about how traditional media still doesn't get it in this internet age, I was looking at some reports over the weekend about a campaign rally that was held Saturday by the Republican Congressman Ron Paul from Texas. Mm-hmm. And he had a campaign rally right after the rally in Des Moines, Iowa that he was excluded from, okay? And the hall that he was in held 1,000 people. Every seat was filled, and there were people standing. But the report the next day that ran in the Des Moines Register said that there was probably a crowd between 500 and 600 people at Paul's rally. Yet here's the interesting